Dr. Fantasy Football, giving tips that never fall. Dr. Fantasy Football, winning things he doesn't stop.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another episode of Dr. Fantasy Football, fresh off of the heels of an incredible Monday Night Football game in which the Falcons beat your Philadelphia Eagles. Did not see that coming. What an awesome way to finish the game, too. Saquon, for as great as he was in fantasy, really dropped the ball. Literally. And Kirk Cousins is back. He is back. Really liked what I saw out of him. But we'll get to that in a second. For today's episode, we are going to do a recap of all the games of the week. And we'll start off, since it pretty much just ended, on the Monday Night Football game. And then from there, we'll go into the updated rankings, power rankings, for players, which is basically just going to be, as of this coming week, how much would I want a player of a certain position. So if you see someone in number one position for the quarterback, that is the quarterback I would want for the rest of the season on my team over any others. If that makes sense. That's kind of how I'm thinking about these power rankings. And then at the end of all of that, which will probably be fused into this video and recorded at a different time, will be my waiver wire pickups for the week. I'm kind of going to go over that anyway during our recap, but I'll just kind of summarize it at the very end. All right, so let's get started right away with our Monday Night Football game that just ended. The Atlanta Falcons took on the Philadelphia Eagles in Philly. And for the first three quarters, it was basically the Saquon Barkley versus Bijan Robinson show. Bijan Robinson had 14 carries for 97 yards, averaging 6.9 yards per carry, which is absolutely incredible. He did lose a few attempts to Tyler Algier, which I didn't quite understand. Algier didn't do much of anything with those attempts. I think he had 8 carries for Saquon's, or for, Bijan's 14. But Bijan made the most of his 14 carries. I mean, he almost broke 100 yards. And again, 7 yards on average is insane. Saquon, on the other hand, had 22 carries for 95 yards. So he had less yards despite a much greater carry amount. And he averaged about 4.3 yards per carry. He also got a 2-point conversion, which was pretty awesome. He also was inches away from a touchdown. So he could have finished with a much better fantasy line, but I mean, he still finished really well for fantasy. I don't have those numbers in front of me. I will have them for the rankings portion because those numbers are going to be updated fully tomorrow. So this initial recap is going to be recorded the night right after the Monday Night Football game, and then Tuesday morning I will record the rest. So yeah, Saquon had a great game despite his real-life play leading to the Eagles taking the L there at home. His fantasy line was pretty incredible, and it could have been even better if not for a couple unfortunate calls, and then we had Darnell Mooney and Drake London, who both caught touchdowns in this game. Darnell Mooney went for 88 yards and a touchdown off 3 receptions. 2 of those receptions came on the very last drive of the game, but they were the 2 big ones. The touchdown actually came much earlier in the game. So, I mean, 3 receptions is 1.5 points in half PPR. 88 yards is 8.8 points. So he had just about 10 right there. And then with the touchdown, 16. Really respectable line for a guy that should probably be flexed moving forward for a lot of teams if they can grab him. Because if Kirk Cousins is back to normal, which we'll get to again, then the Falcons are looking like an offense you might want to invest in. And then Drake London, who also caught a touchdown pass, had 6 receptions for 54 yards. He's clearly the wide receiver one. Clearly the wide receiver one on this team. Kirk Cousins was trying to target him as much as possible. But Mooney has explosive potential. So it's a tough call, really, when to play which and which is the one that should be played. You know, Mooney had more points than Drake London on this day. Again, it really comes off the heels of 2 big passes right at the very last drive. But at the same time, Drake London's touchdown came on that last drive. So, I mean, they both really benefited off that last drive. Yeah, hard to say. But I'm big on both. I think you should invest in the Atlanta offense. And it's good to see now that Kirk Cousins is kind of picking up steam and getting back to normal that it really was just quarterback play holding back the Falcons. This is a huge win for them. And so Devontae Smith was the only receiver really worth talking about for Philadelphia. He had 7 receptions for 76 yards and a touchdown, which would put his fantasy point total, not counting for any rushes I may have missed while putting my documents together, that would account for about 16.6, maybe 17 points. He was like the guy on the team without A.J. Brown there, so he's going to benefit a lot off of the couple games that A.J.'s going to miss. Some white wide receiver dude named Britton Covey had kind of a game for the Eagles in terms of his targets. He didn't really do much with the targets he got. He had 6 receptions, but they were all on short routes. I don't know, though. He could possibly be a sneaky pickup and someone you might flex depending on matchup with A.J. Brown out. Once A.J. Brown comes back, I don't think he's someone worth having on a roster. The QBs were both awesome. Jalen Hurts reverted back to the Jalen Hurts that has been a fantasy beast the last 2 years. He did a lot of running in that game. But, of course, his pass play, of all the running back type quarterbacks, I wouldn't even really put Jalen Hurts in there. I would just say he's one of the best quarterbacks that also runs. So, you know, if you do consider him one of the like RB QBs, he might be one of the only ones who can actually pass. So he's always going to be good there. He was 23 for 30. He passed for 183 yards with 1 touchdown and 1 interception on the final play of the game. It was a kind of a desperate heave to get into field goal range. He got hit as he threw it. So, you know, it's not really an interception that was indicative of how he was playing. He finished with a really good fantasy line despite the interception. He rushed for 85 yards with a rushing touchdown. So for fantasy, he was a beast. I think he got something close to like 23 points or something. And the one interception was kind of just an unfortunate thing that was from trying to make something happen at the very end. Big Kier Kirk had 241 pass yards with 2 touchdowns. I mean, he is back to form. He looked awesome. And he said he still doesn't feel 100%, and he's still kind of like ramping up there. So I'm big on Kirk for the rest of the season. Chicago versus Houston was another game, and that's about as much as I can say about it. Caleb Williams is an absolute bust. He can still be fantasy relevant if he can start getting some touchdowns and stop throwing interceptions. It's a tough task with that O-line. Rome Odunze is not a good player. He was really hyped as a draft prospect, but he's not a good player. Watching him play, I mean, he dropped some passes straight to his hands. And look, I'm not here to defend Caleb Williams or like talk big on him, even though maybe I should, because I talked so big on him prior to him coming into the NFL. But from what I've seen, I'm very low on Caleb Williams. I think the Bears are a poverty franchise, and they gave up Justin Fields because they had the first pick when they could have traded the first pick and got him an O-line. And taken their chances that maybe Justin Fields wasn't as bad as that O-line was making him look, who are now making Caleb Williams look even worse. So, I'm not someone that's going to come out here and defend Caleb Williams, but Rome Odunze was a horrible receiver for him. He could not catch the ball. He definitely showered in a vat of butter right before the game. DJ Moore is a great receiver, but I don't think I'd trust any Bears receivers moving forward. That game was atrocious for them. That O-line is horrible, and DJ Moore looked pissed that Caleb could not give him the ball. I mean, every time he threw it towards DJ Moore, it was way off. Houston, on the other hand, is a well-oiled machine. They had an awesome game against one of the best defenses in the league. CJ Stroud had 260 yards with a tutty. Their running game had no shot, so Joe Mixon is not someone I can talk about this week, but the Bears defense is really that good. That's no knock on Joe Mixon. Nico Collins is the clear wide receiver 1 on this team, but I think week to week it's too hard to tell if it's going to be him or if it's going to be Diggs getting the majority of the points, because the problem with having so many offensive weapons is that you never know which one's going to get the touchdowns, which is really the big thing, right? Anyone can get the yards. Neither one of Diggs or Collins are explosive players. They're more possession wide receivers, so you're not going to get huge yardage through the air with either one of them. So you can't really rely on them for that. You're going to need to rely on them for getting lots of receptions, which sucks to rely on half PPR, and 2, getting touchdowns, which it's like I said, way too hard to tell which one of them is going to be the one any given week. Tank Dell has pretty much been erased from this offense. I'm not sure why that's the case. He is CJ's best friend in real life on this team, so not really sure why the coaches have kind of schemed him out. He might not be fully back to health. It's the only thing I can think of, because he was dynamite last year. I mean, he was their best player last year, so that's quite shocking. But yeah, Tank Dell is I'm out on Tank Dell. He's not a part of this offense. Cincinnati versus Kansas City, that was a horrible game. The Bengals looked good, the Chiefs looked bad, and the Chiefs still won. Burrow looks like he's warming up. He looked much better this week than he did last, which, like I said last week, is not surprising for Joe Burrow. He looked solid against a really good defense. He went 23 for 36 on his passes, 258 yards with 2 touchdowns. That's a huge line. 250 yards is awesome for any quarterback for fantasy, because that's 10 points just from their passing. So you've cleared the 10-point mark just from passes. Adds 2 touchdowns, that's 18, right? And he ran a little bit in that game, so I don't know what his total line was, but it was 18 plus. Chase Brown was better than Zach Moss in that game. Neither one of them are playable. Jamar Chase is officially on fraud alert, but I'm not out on him yet, because we've all seen what Jamar Chase can do. He's arguably a top 5 wide receiver in skill, and he's probably just going to need a little bit of time to start warming up since he missed practices. I mean, everybody else got to practice. Jamar Chase didn't. So, he deserves some grace for that. Mike Gesicki was awesome this game. Their tight end. I don't know if it was like a one-time thing. It just happened to be the game script supporting the tight end getting a bunch of receptions. But, I mean, he got 7 receptions for 91 yards, which is super great for any tight end. I'm not buying in on him, but something to note. Mahomes is on fraud alert with Jamar Chase. I mean, this is the second game in a row he's been awful, just like last year. He was awful a bunch. He had only 150 passing yards. He had 2 interceptions, but he also had 2 touchdowns, which in real life is not good. You don't want an interception for every touchdown. That's really bad, actually. 150 yards for a quarterback is not good, especially when you're Mahomes and you have as many weapons as you have this year. Their best player got injured in Isaiah Pacheco. Them not having a running game is going to hurt the passing game, but it's probably going to help the receivers despite it hurting the fast passing game, because they're going to need to pass a lot. So be all in on Rashee Rice. He went 5 receptions for 75 yards and a tutty. Great line. He is a QB or a wide receiver one type play for the rest of the year. Nobody else on this team is worth playing. Travis Kelce had 3 targets and only 1 catch. Jury's out on him. Not quite clear what to make of how he's been used so far this season, but I am getting lower on him every week, and I'm getting to the point of maybe he's a drop. We'll see what happens. Next game, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Denver Broncos, which saw Justin Fields go up against Bo Nix. Justin Fields looked really, really good this game, but unfortunately, none of that's going to show on the stat sheet because every one of his big plays got flagged. I mean, like, I wish I wish you guys could watch this game. If you have time, go back and see the highlights because most of the highlights were on penalties. He had some bombs, accurate bombs to George Pickens. I mean, that connection looks special. But unfortunately, they all got flagged, so he didn't get any of those yards. I mean, I think he missed out on like 150 pass yards and 2 touchdowns from the flags. So Justin Fields was awesome, but you won't see that. The running game is still mid as fuck, so I'm not picking up. If I had the opportunity, I wouldn't be picking up either one of their running backs, not Jalen Warren, not Najee Harris. Bo Nix was against a really tough defense in the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. I mean, same as Justin Fields being up against the Denver Broncos defense. But, yeah, Bo Nix was against a really tough defense, and his finish would have actually been pretty good. I mean, he had 250 pass yards, 25 rush yards. The only problem is he threw 2 interceptions and no touchdowns. If he can just flip that around and have 2 interceptions or 2 touchdowns and no interceptions, he would have had one of the best finishes of all QBs. So, I mean, he's right there. He's right on the brink, on the borderline of being a decent quarterback. I'm high on him for the rest of the season. Not high as in, like, he has super big upside, but, like, he's someone I would be looking to play as my second quarterback unless I'm against a really tough defense like the Steelers. Josh Reynolds and Lil Jordan Humphrey seemed like his main targets through these 2 weeks. So they're both people that you might be looking at to pick off the waiver wire. They might be worth it. I'm not like 100%. They're not people I'm excited for to pick up off the waiver, but yeah, I mean, if one of them, those are 2 people that have the chance to break out, and one of them may very well do it with Bo Nix under center. The running game is awful. I'm not touching a running back from here. Okay, then we have the Rams versus the Arizona Cardinals. I'm out on all things Rams. I don't think there's a single player on the Rams that's playable anymore. That includes Kyren Williams. The offensive line is so bad. They're so hurt, but they're so bad because of their injuries that they have no protection in the running or passing game. So it's way too hard to play a wide receiver, a quarterback, or a running back from this team because it doesn't matter how skilled they are. It's like, imagine you didn't have an O-line and you just had to find a way to get through like 5 people coming at you full force. Like, because that's basically what their O-line is. It's just, empty space. So out on all things Rams. If someone is going to break out from the Rams, it's going to be Tyler Johnson or Jordan Whittington. So Tyler Johnson's not available. I have him. Whittington is available, so someone to look out for on the waiver wire. Kyler Murray had a huge game, but, I mean, the Rams are looking like the worst defense in the league, so I don't know how much you take from that. I don't think he's having a game like that against anybody else. James Conner is the main offense for this team, and Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride were both incredible this game, but of the 2, I would still be wary of Marvin Harrison. And this is coming from a huge Marvin Harrison fan, and the reason I say this is despite how amazing his game was 7 minutes long. After that initial 7 minutes that got all of his fantasy points, he was not looked at again during that game. I mean, he went radio silent. So I don't know. I don't know what it is with Kyler. He's just like not really looking out for Marvin Harrison unless it's extremely obvious he beat his man and he's got like 50 yards of separation. Kyler's not even looking to pass to him. So he's a horrible quarterback, I think, because you've got an absolute weapon on your hands with Marvin Harrison and you're not looking to target him. It's crazy. Then we have the New York Giants versus the Washington Commanders. Two absolutely horrible teams went at it in a fierce battle of mid. The Commanders' D is horrible. Maybe the only people that really give the Rams a run for their money. So the Giants had a monster game on their ass. Daniel Jones is bad, but he got 2 touchdowns this game. Singletary's bad, but he ran 16 times for 95 yards and a touchdown. Neighbors got 10 receptions for 127 yards and a touchdown on 18 targets, which is ridiculous, and the main reason everyone was so high on Neighbors. But he had a really bad drop at the end of this game, like right to his hands, that lost them the game. So I think the hype on Neighbors is a little unfounded. I don't think he's as good as everyone's making him out to be, but he is a volume play. So on the right matchups, he can have a wide receiver 1 type week. However, on average, weekly, I would look at him at most as a flex play. Yeah. And then the Giants' defense is pretty solid, and Jaden Daniels still did pretty well. He passed 29 times, completed 23 of them, passed for 226 yards, had 44 rush yards. His only problem was no touchdowns, which, I mean, against the Giants' defense is not, a death sentence. Terry McLaurin is obviously his main target. He had 8 targets. I think he only had 6 receptions, though. All the play calls for the Commanders are short routes. So there's not a lot to work with for Terry McLaurin or Jaden Daniels in terms of the pass game. Daniels doesn't seem horrible at passing the ball. I think the Commanders should give him a chance. And if his pass game gets unlocked, I mean, this guy could be a sneaky QB1 finish. QB1 overall, not tiered. Yeah, the receiving game is mid as fuck, though, so we'll see. I mean, it's McLaurin is his only real option, and I don't even think McLaurin's all that good. Gunshot Rob is the man on this team. He is the best player on this team by far. He had 17 carries for 133 yards, which comes out to 7.8 yards per carry on 17 carries. That is absurd. He's having a breakout season, but he has no touchdowns yet, which is insane. So, he doesn't have the points to show for actually how great he's been this season. But we'll see how, the season continues. Next, we have the Jets at Titans. Actually, I don't know if it's at, but, Jets versus Titans. Aaron Rodgers sucks. Yeah, he sucks. Breece Hall had a good game. He had 14 carries for 62 yards at 4.4 yards per average, which for Breece Hall is pretty good. It's not the 5 that you expect out of an elite running back, but Breece Hall isn't an elite running back. In fact, I would say he's average. So 4.4 is really good. He had 7 targets for 52 yards and 1 touchdown. So volume-wise, Breece is a volume monster. We know this, but we keep reiterating the fact that he is a volume play, and he gets a lot of it. Garrett Wilson is a drop. Yeah, he doesn't have a quarterback. He still doesn't have a quarterback that can support how good of a player he is. Braylon Allen is a player on this team I would consider picking up from the waiver wire. He seems like he could be a league-winning handcuff if Breece Hall should go down. He is a better player than Breece Hall, I think. From what I saw from the both of them, he seemed like the better player between the two. So, yeah, they played a really bad defense, and they were only solid. They weren't great. They were just solid. So I'm not high on the Jets moving forward this season. Will Levis was okay. He just seems like an idiot. He's so dumb. He just keeps making boneheaded decisions. He was 19 for 28 for 192 yards, and he went 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 1 fumble. Again, he does a lot of boneheaded things. Tony Pollard's not that good, but he is also a volume play. He had a lot of volume this game. He had 17 carries for 62 yards at 3.65 yards per average, per carry, and he had 5 receptions for 40 yards. So a lot of volume, got a lot of yards. He will be good for fantasy for you. I just don't know at one point the Titans might consider playing Tyjae Spears a little bit more because Pollard just isn't it. Although Tyjae Spears isn't it either. He's not any better. Calvin Ridley had an awesome game. He had 4 receptions for 77 yards and a touchdown. It's not the amount of receptions that, makes you confident playing him week in and week out. But he made the most with what he got. Solid game for the Titans. I mean, they were against an elite defense and they got points. So I'm kind of a little bit more confident in playing Titans players moving forward. Next, we have Seattle versus the New England Patriots. Geno Smith went monkey mode. I mean, he went 33 for 44. He had 327 pass yards with a touchdown. 327 pass yards accounts for 13 points, and that's all in the air, not accounting for the touchdown. Zach Charbonnet, which is Kenneth Walker's backup, is trash. He had 2.7 yards per carry. This was a huge day for DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba. DK always has this, right? He'll have one huge game in between 3 horrible ones. So nothing new for DK, but Jackson Smith had the most targets on the team at 16 targets. He caught 12 of those, and he got 117 yards. He hasn't had a touchdown yet this season, or he didn't have a touchdown that game. I'm not sure about this season, but he didn't have a touchdown that game. So he got to like 17 points or something, and that was without a touchdown. I mean, if he is going to be the most targeted player on this team, he is the best player on this team. So I'm super high on Jackson Smith-Njigba moving forward. We'll see what happens, though. The jury's still out on how the Seahawks are going to play. I don't really know what to make of their team yet. I should also note that despite DK's big day, he got like 22 points. Half of those were from one play, one single 56-yard touchdown. So, I'm still low on DK Metcalf. I think he's a joke of a player. He's such a bum. So he'll have these big games, but I'm not going to be high on him off of them. The Patriots' entire game plan was to run the ball. Jacoby Brissett went 15 for 27 for 150 yards and a touchdown, which is solid. But, I mean, really the story of this game on the Patriots side was the run game. Ramondre is being used as a workhorse back, but he was not actually that great this game, which isn't that crazy because the Seahawks do have a solid defense. He had 21 carries for 81 yards and a touchdown at almost 4 yards per carry, which, like I said, like 5 is for elite running backs. Anything lower than 4 is not good. So 3.9 is not good. It's serviceable. On the other hand, the Patriots also had Antonio Gibson as the RB2, who also got 11 carries for 96 yards. No touchdowns, but 8.7 yards per carry. So that's a little bit worrisome for Ramondre Stevenson moving forward because the Patriots have now seen that they have a really good secondary option and maybe they don't need a workhorse running back. Maybe they can do a committee. A lot of the times it doesn't actually turn out that way. When these backups have these great games, it usually doesn't change anything about how the teams play. So we'll see. Hunter Henry was the only person that was fed in the pass game. He had a pretty good line. I didn't write it down because who gives a shit? It's Hunter Henry. But yeah, I mean, that's the only person that's going to eat from the pass on this team. Next, we have the San Francisco 49ers versus the Minnesota Vikings. Brock Purdy was solid in this game. He got a 319 pass yards for 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Jordan Mason is the real deal. He had 20 carries, so that's good volume. He had 100 yards on those 20 carries, so that's 5 yards per carry. Great. And 2, he broke 100 yards. Great. He also had a touchdown. He's really good, actually. Deebo Samuel had an incredible game with 8 receptions for 110 yards. George Kittle had an incredible game with 7 receptions for 76 yards. Brandon Ayuk had a concerning game with only 4 receptions for only 43 yards. So I would normally be extremely low on Ayuk moving forward with how he's been playing, this season so far. But Debo's injured, so I'm really high on Ayuk moving forward. Next up, we have, we can talk about Aaron Jones, who is back to form for the Minnesota Vikings, and by that I mean he sucks. He had 9 carries for 32 yards at 3.5 yards per carry. He did catch 5 passes for 36 yards, so he's still serviceable for fantasy, but I think last week was just the fluke. Ty Chandler outshined him. He had 10 carries for 82 yards, which puts him at 8.2 yards per carry, which is an incredible, incredible day. Sam Darnold is legit in terms of he is a solid quarterback for this team, and he is going to be able to spearhead this team and get the fantasy players off of this team their points and get some points himself. But he did have 2 fumbles and an interception this game, showing that he may still be that same turnover machine that he was, and that he is one catastrophic game, or he is due for one catastrophic game very soon. Yeah, but he had 5 rushing attempts for 32 yards, which was really crazy for me because did not see that coming out of Sam Darnold. He also had 268 pass yards. So, again, he had a pretty good game. Just the turnovers, got to clean up the turnovers. And I don't really have much to say about Justin Jefferson because he is him. Next, we have the Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't really have much to talk about on Cleveland's side. They suck on offense. Deshaun Watson had a good day. I know that. I didn't write it down, though, because it's Deshaun Watson. And, I think his good day basically just came off of a rushing touchdown. He is really bad. Don't let this fool you. He is really bad. He is still really bad. Cleveland only made this a game because their defense is so freaking good. But despite that, the Jaguars kind of did still get some fantasy points for their owners in spite of Cleveland's incredible defense. This was a really tough matchup for Trevor Lawrence. He had a solid 13-point-something total finish. He went 14 for 30, which is a really bad completion rate, for 220 yards, which is really good off only 14 passes. And ETN went 13 carries for 52 yards, which is not very good, but he did manage to get a touchdown on top of all that. The only really good player to point out this game was Brian Thomas Jr. Again, he is a big play potential every game. He only had 2 catches, and he had almost 100 yards, which is mind-blowing. Gabe Davis was the most targeted player on this team at 7 targets. I think Brian Thomas Jr. only had 4 targets. Nobody was really catching these passes based on the stats that I saw. So, I watched Red Zone, so I didn't see every single pass that got thrown this game. So I don't know how many of those targets that are being counted on the stat sheet were actually catchable balls. So who knows? They could have just caught all the catchable ones, right? So I don't really know what to make of that game because it was such a tough defense. But personally for me, being able to do, I am pretty invested in the Jacksonville offense. I have all their players. So for me, I was pretty happy with what they were able to do against the Browns. Next, we have the Colts versus the Packers. The Packers are a middle-of-the-pack defense, and Anthony Richardson looked like the worst quarterback to ever exist against them. He is absolute garbage. He had 204 passing yards, but on a 50% completion rate. Pity is shitty. He got 7 targets, but only caught 3 of them for 22 yards. Again, I don't know what to make of the targets because I didn't see every single pass, but Alec Pierce also had 7 targets, and he caught 5 of them for 56 yards. So Pittman is getting beat out by some white dude. I think he's white. Either way, he's a nobody. Adonai Mitchell isn't even being used on this team, and he was a first-round pick. So I don't know what's going on with the Colts. Jonathan Taylor seems like he is the entire offense for them. He had 12 carries for 103 yards, which is outstanding. And he had 2 catches for 32 yards, which is outstanding. Everybody was fumbling this game. Anthony Richardson, I think, had 2 fumbles. Jonathan Taylor had a fumble. Yeah. Again, it's only week 2, so it's really hard to make strong judgments on anybody. It usually takes like 3 full games until you kind of have a really good sense of what the teams are and that's the amount of time they need to kind of get used to that year's offensive scheme and defensive scheme. It takes a little learning process. Anyway, on the other hand of that game, we have the Packers, and Malik Willis is okay. He seems like he's okay, which was shocking. He was able to run that offense. I mean, he went 12 for 14 for 122 yards and a touchdown. He had 41 rush yards. He allowed the Packers to play their game. But with all that being said, I mean, he wasn't really that impactful in the game because the game pretty much was the Josh Jacobs show and probably will be up until, Jordan Love comes back. But Josh Jacobs looks like he's back to form. I mean, he went 32 carries, which already is mind-blowing. 32 carries is a lot. Anyway, he went 32 carries for 151 yards at about 4.7 yards per carry, which is an incredible total for 32 carries. Yeah, I mean, I'm high on him for the rest of the season. He's obviously not going to have that level of production for the rest of the season, but if still, I mean, he's getting right now, I think he's averaging overall 5 yards per carry. And compared to the Josh Jacobs I saw last year, that's Josh Jacobs from 2 years ago, who was a fantasy top 3 RB. So, yeah, high on Josh Jacobs for the rest of the year. Even if Jordan Love comes back, I mean, even with less volume, he's still going to be productive, and he isn't even getting touchdowns. So once he gets the touchdowns too, I mean, he is going to be a stud for the rest of the season. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers played the Detroit Lions and just let Baker bake. I mean, the dude has been awesome to start this season. He went 12 for 19 for 185 yards, threw a touchdown, but also threw an interception. But he also had 34 rush yards with a second touchdown. Bucky Irving is going to get some play now that Rachaad White is hurt, and he did play a little bit in this game, but he is also just as bad as Rachaad White. I mean, he's horrible. He had 3 yards per carry for 22 yards, and he had, I think, 7 attempts. Chris Godwin may be a league winner. He had another big game, had 7 receptions for 117 yards and a touchdown. Yeah, I mean, he is looking incredible this year now that he's healthy. Jared Goff is no bueno. He had 34 completions on 55 passes. He had 307 yards, which up until now sounds pretty good, except he had 0 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Under pressure, this man is the worst quarterback of all time. Jahmyr Gibbs is the man on this team. He's the best player on this team. He had 6.5 yards per carry. He had 13 carries for 84 yards. The only problem with Jahmyr Gibbs is, for some reason, Dan Campbell keeps giving David Montgomery just as many carries. David Montgomery, unlike Jahmyr Gibbs, is a bad player. He's not that good. He had 11 carries for 35 yards at 3 yards per carry, which is among the worst of the starting running backs in the league. Jahmyr Gibbs also had 7 receptions for 22 yards. I mean, he's an every week start, RB1 type caliber player. Amon-Ross St. Brown is back to form. He had 11 receptions off 19 targets this game, which is much different than the last game. And he went for 119 yards. Jameson Williams is not a fluke, which I thought was very possible from last week, but he had 11 targets this game, caught 5 of them, and went for 79 yards. So he's not a fluke and probably a must-play every week, at least a must-flex. Derek Carr is a star. He went into the Dallas Cowboys, or actually, I think the game was in New Orleans, whatever. He played the Cowboys defense this week, and he destroyed them. So Derek Carr is a star. I just really don't expect him to keep this up because I've seen Derek Carr for years not be that good of a player. He's a mid quarterback. He's a middle of the pack quarterback. So he's been awesome this year, and I don't know if I'm a believer yet. Alvin Kamara is a god. I mean, I should not have doubted him. He has been, every year that he's been healthy, has been one of the best players in fantasy, and this year doesn't look to be any different. I mean, I don't know how he's still doing this at his age, at his mileage, but I mean, he had 5.75 yards per carry on the Cowboys defense. He carried it 20 times. He got 115 yards. He also had 2 receptions for 65 yards. Obviously he's the number 1 player in fantasy right now, and I don't see a stop to that anytime soon. I would be patient with Chris Olave. He had 6 targets this game, which is the most targets on the team, and he got 4 of them for 81 yards, so he had a pretty good game. I know a lot of people are looking at Rashid Shaheed right now as being like maybe the wide receiver 1 for this team, but really Rashid Shaheed had just 1 really good pass that went for a touchdown. It was like a 40-yarder, and all of his points came off that 1 play. I think he's fool's gold. I think, Chris Olave is the guy on this team still as far as receivers go. Be patient with him. Dak Prescott on the Cowboys is still solid despite what his stats from this week may tell you. He threw one touchdown with 2 interceptions, but he had 293 pass yards. And honestly, this Saints defense has been causing problems for people. So I'm not going to start doubting Dak Prescott all of a sudden off that 1 bad game. The RBs on this team are playable. And surprisingly, Jalen Tolbert was the target leader for the Dallas Cowboys this game. He had 6 receptions. I don't remember how many targets he actually had. He had the same actually as CeeDee Lamb. So he was the target leader, but he had the same amount as CeeDee Lamb. But yeah, he had 6 receptions for 82 yards. So Tolbert, he might be coming up as the wide receiver 2 on this team, and is another guy I might look at in the waiver wire this week. Especially if CeeDee Lamb is going to be doubled like every game, which seems like it's going to be the case. Yeah. Next we have the Chargers and the Panthers. I mean, obviously we know the Panthers are a nothing burger team. So Dobbins went off. He had 17 carries for 131 yards. One of those included a 40-yard touchdown. Justin Herbert's a dud. He's a complete dud. I mean, he's doing nothing he's had it so easy to start this year, and he's doing nothing. He's a dud. Every receiver on the Chargers is probably a dud. The one guy I'll point out is Quentin Johnston, who last year was one of the worst players I had ever seen play the wide receiver position, but looked pretty good in this game. Granted, it's against the Panthers, but I mean, just him catching a ball, even if he was wide open and he got the ball, I'd be impressed. That's how bad he was last year. So, I mean, if he's able to catch a ball now, he went 5 for 51 this game with 2 touchdowns, I think. He might have upside. I mean, there is going to be a player, a wide receiver on the Chargers with upside. It might be Quentin Johnston. I'm bought out on McConkey. I'm no longer a believer in Ladd McConkey. I think he's a drop. Next up, I have for the Panthers. I don't have anything to say about the Panthers except that Andy Dalton gives Panthers receivers some hope. So if you want to take a long shot on a wide receiver in this coming week on the waiver wire, a Panther might not be a bad choice. Maybe Adam Thielen. Andy Dalton definitely makes them a team. Second to last game, I have the Las Vegas Raiders against the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, we know the Ravens are an elite defense, and yet they allowed Minshew mania. I mean, they let Gardner Minshew go off on their ass, which is super embarrassing. So, the Raiders had a good game. If Minshew's doing that against the Ravens, he may continue to do it now that he's kind of warming up with his team. I'm out on the Raiders RBs. That includes Madison and Zamir White. Devontae Adams, I'm back in on. I mean, if Minshew can be a serviceable quarterback, you have to be in on Devontae Adams. He's one of the best wide receivers of the last decade. He went for 110 yards off 9 receptions and managed to add a touchdown on top of that. Brock Bowers is looking absolutely scrumptious as a fantasy asset. He also had 9 receptions and he almost hit 100 yards. He had 98 yards as a tight end. He is going to probably finish as the tight end 1 this year, the way he's been used so far, and just his fucking talent, to be honest. And then on the other side, I have Lamar is not the star. He's pretty bad. He had 21 pass completions off 34 pass attempts for 247 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. He is just not a good passer. Doesn't really matter, though. He's still a fantasy stud. Derrick Henry had a really good game with 18 carries and 84 yards. That's a good game for Henry. I think he also added a touchdown on top of that. So I'm still not high on Henry moving forward. The Ravens just don't run the ball enough for me to be high on Henry. He's going to be basically a matchup play, hoping that he gets a touchdown, because without the touchdown, he's going to lose you weeks if he's starting for you, right? Yeah, Zay Flowers, give him his blank, you know what I mean? He was awesome this game. He really is a good wide receiver. I mean, if you just watch him play, he runs routes so well. He gets great separation. I mean, he's a stud, and it's really unfortunate that his quarterback is Lamar Jackson, because he's not going to be able to show off how good Zay Flowers is. That being said, I think Zay Flowers is going to be his biggest target for the rest of the year. I'm low on Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Andrews kind of came back to form this game. He had 4 receptions for 51 yards. Likely only had 2 receptions for 26 yards. I would be... If I'm playing one of these tight ends, it's Mark Andrews, but it's not like I would feel great about playing either one of them. But that's good news for Zay Flowers owner, because I think Zay Flowers is going to be his top target for the rest of the year. And if Lamar can just fucking polish his passing game a little bit and just clean it up a little bit, Zay Flowers is going to be awesome this year. And then the final game, I have our Thursday night game, which was an absolute shellacking by the Buffalo Bills on their child franchise, the Miami Dolphins. Every time these two teams get together, Josh Allen whoops to his ass. Yeah, I mean, more of the same this game. The only bright spot on the Miami Dolphins side was obviously Devon Achane. You got the return of Tua Tagovailoa. And then obviously Tua Tagovailoa got a concussion after an extremely stupid head dive into Damar Hamlin's chest. So, you know, they're probably going to get Skylar Thompson or some other veteran quarterback. They're going to probably have to find some veteran quarterback to come take over the reins from Tua. Because if it's Skylar Thompson, I mean, be out on Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, especially with Devon Achane's rise into superstardom, because he was their entire offense. I mean, he ran 22 times, got 96 yards. He caught 7 passes for 69 yards. He was the entire offense. And if Tua's not playing, and if it's Skylar Thompson, or I think it's Skylar Thompson is his name, if it's Skylar Thompson that's going to be under center, he's not going to be able to catch Hill or Waddle. I mean, we've seen it before. What was it? It was last year or 2 years ago that we saw how Skylar Thompson plays. He is not going to be able to support Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle. And if Achane is going to be there for him in the receiving game, it's going to be Devon Achane, right? So I'm huge on Achane for the rest of the year. I'm low on Waddle and Hill for the rest of the year, unless they get an actual veteran quarterback, if they can somehow steal Joe Flacco, or if they sign someone that's already retired that, you know, is willing to come back and help them out. Maybe a Tom Brady, who knows? Then, you know, unless that happens, I'm out on Buffalo other than Devon Achane. Or Miami, other than Devon Achane. And then on the Buffalo side, James Cook finally showed up, as in Josh Allen finally allowed James Cook to show up. He had and for some reason I didn't write it down, but he had 7.1 yards per carry on a good amount of attempts. He had 3 touchdowns. Obviously, after halftime, they didn't really play him anymore because they were cooking the fuck out of the Miami Dolphins. Josh Allen obviously didn't have a very good fantasy finish, but that's not too surprising since they didn't really play him in the second half since the game was too easy. It was a bad game script for him and Cook still got like 28 points, so... The thing about this team, right, is the receivers. It seems like Khalil Shakir is the wide receiver 1, but if he is the wide receiver 1, I don't know if I buy in on him. I mean, Khalil Shakir's not that good. He had 5 receptions for 54 yards. So, I mean, that's not serviceable for fantasy. But that being said, again, they did not really play their starters after the second half. So maybe if he had a full game, that would have been a much more fantasy serviceable line. But I still it's Khalil Shakir. Like, I cannot be excited about that. I would sell my Keon Coleman stock. I like the kid. I thought the kid was not that good of a player coming into the draft, right? And I still think that, but I've been seeing videos of how determined he is to get better and how much practice he does. And something about that kind of mentality really hypes me up for that player's potential. So I don't know. He might be the type that really works at it so much that he could have a breakout. But right in this moment, right here, right now, based on what I've seen, I would sell my Keon Coleman stock. If you can sell him for some other player, I would. Yeah, Josh Allen doesn't even look his way. I saw him like in the huddle going up to Josh Allen and like asking him like, hey, can you like pass me the ball or some shit like that. The video didn't actually have audio, but that's what the people were saying was being said. And Josh Allen would not talk to him. He would not look at him, nothing. Like it's like he disrespects him for being a rookie or something, which, oh God. It's something about Josh Allen. You just want to fucking beat the shit out of him, no? It's just me? I don't know. Yeah, so sell your Keon Coleman stock. His quarterback is absolute ass. So James Cook is the guy on this team, and that is the only one I would be excited about. All right. All right. We are back. Well, I guess for you guys, we never really left. But we are back. And now we're going to move on to talking about our, my rankings for the rest of the season. Well, they're not really rest of the season rankings. Like I said earlier, they're more of like a power ranking, who I would want to have right now. Obviously, there are a bunch of an unbelievable amount of injured players. So I rank them based on how badly I would still want them on my team, knowing they're coming back. But not necessarily. I mean, everyone that's injured took a dip, because how badly do I want an injured Deebo Samuel next week? Right? Not that badly. But I still want him for the rest of the season. But, like, not for next week. So, like, yeah, he's going to take a dip. You know what I mean? All right. So let's move on to our quarterback selections. And at number 1, we have none other than Josh Allen, who has basically stayed at number 1 since the beginning of this podcast series. He is currently the quarterback 6 on the season with 20.5 points on average every week. And he just has a lot of variability. Obviously, on this season so far, obviously we know that this last game, he didn't really play the whole game because they dominated the Dolphins. So week 1, 31.2 points. Week 2, just about 10 points. That would imply that you never know what you're going to get out of Josh Allen, but you do. It was just the game script. He might be quarterback 6 right now on the season, but in reality, he's still by far the best quarterback in fantasy, and there is nobody that's touching him. Number 2, I have Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is currently the QB4 on the season with 21.3 points on average. He scored, and I should say right now, these stats that I have in front of me are from Fantasy Pros, and Fantasy Pros, for some reason, counts an interception as only -1 point, so these are not actually true to what our league shows. Like, I know Patrick Mahomes is much lower than what this list is showing him as. So just keep that in mind. Unfortunately, there's nothing I could do about that. There was no option anywhere on Fantasy Pros to make it so that it's a 2-point interception count. So maybe that is the standard. I think, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why that's the standard for Fantasy Pros because I've never seen it be anything but negative 2 points. Anyway, I think in our league, Jaden Daniels is actually number 4 and Lamar is number 5. But that's neither here nor there. Anyway, Lamar Jackson, number 4 on the season. He had one game with 25 points last week. This week, he had a 17-point week with not the best game. So he's a great floor player, which obviously we knew because of that running ability. Jalen Hurts is my number 3. Yeah, and this list doesn't have the updated stats for Jalen Hurts and Kirk Cousins and, Vikings and Eagles players because, unfortunately, Fantasy Pros has not updated that yet. They're a really shit website. But I can tell you that Jalen Hurts is the QB7 so far on the season with a 20.1 point average, just ahead of Anthony Richardson. So in your heads, if you can just bring everybody else down from 7 on, he's looking incredible, and they got the tush push rolling a lot last night. So Jalen Hurts is definitely back in. He's so back. He is so back. Number 4, I have Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels did not have a great game this week, only scoring 13.4 points, but he is still the QB5 on the season on average, scoring 20.8 points. Yeah, he played a good defense this week, so at the end of the day, I'm still putting these 4 running backs, 3 of these running backs in Jalen Hurts. I'm still going to put them in the top 4. Number 5, I have Baker Mayfield. He followed up an incredible QB2 level week with, not QB2 level, QB2 finish week with 19.8 points. He did run for a touchdown, so he actually does have that capability. And otherwise, he's just been really, really good. He has 24.7 points on average this season per week and is the QB1 overall as of right now. So, all in on Baker Mayfield. Next up, we have Anthony Richardson at number 6. He is the QB8 on the season so far with 20 points averaged. Yeah, he was horrible. He was horrible this week. Absolutely dreadful with 12.9 points, tons of interceptions. So that's 12.9 on Fantasy Pros, but I think he threw 3 interceptions. So realistically, for our league, it was like 9.9 points. Yeah, he can only run. He can only run. The other ones, they might not be great Lamar Jackson's not a great passer. Jaden Daniels isn't a great passer, but they can pass the ball at least. Anthony Richardson cannot pass the ball. So he's I don't know. Number 7, I got Kyler Murray. Obviously, he is the QB3, as you can see on this visual companion, on the season so far, averaging 21.4 points, but a lot of that is just because he played the Rams and cooked them. And I don't really, he's not going to stay QB3 for the rest of this season. So he's good. He's good. And obviously, I think he's top 10. So, QB7 for the season is what my guess is going to be. I think he'll finish in the top 10 QBs. Why do I have him on here twice? Huh. Am I missing someone? Huh. Okay. Sorry, you guys can't even see this other list I'm talking about. But yeah, so, jury's out on Kyler. He will finish in the top 10 QBs, I think, easily. But QB3, where he is right now, that's not his skill level. He is definitely going to drop from there. Next up, I have at number 8, C.J. Stroud, who is the QB11 on the season right now with 16.5 points. He is one of the only people in this, higher level, higher echelon QBs that has been kind of consistent with where he's been. He's not having
like he's not higher up due to the benefit of one just giant boom game, you know? He got 18.7 one week, 14.3 the second week against a really good defense. So he's a easy QB1 play every week. Number 9, I have Joe Burrow. You know, as he's heating up, he's probably going to rise up and up the overall rankings. Not my rankings, as in the fantasy pro, or just in general in fantasy football. So he's at 12.6 points per week right now, which is everyone that's around that same area, like their difference between their averages is like 1 point, plus or minus, from QB 13 to QB 26. They're in the range of 10 to 13. So they're all really, really close and really, really mid as of right now. But Joe Burrow was really hurt by that 8-point week 1 total. I think he's still a top 10. The Joe Burrow that I know was back this last game. So we'll see how he goes the rest of the season. Number 10, I have Dak Prescott. Currently is QB 15 on the season. Maybe worse. I don't know where Kirk Cousins actually is, but based on Fantasy Pros and keeping in mind that Jalen Hurts is QB 7, Dak Prescott is QB 15 on the season with an 11.5 total in a bad game script and a 14.9 total in a good game script at a 13.2 average. Prescott didn't have the best game against the Tampa Bay defense, the Saints defense. But that being said, he still had a solid game. He had a solid point total. So despite even having a kind of bad game in a good game script, he still finished with 15 points, which is solid. I'm pretty confident, he's going to finish pretty high up there this year. And by pretty high up there, I mean he's easily a top 15 QB finish. And I'm pretty confident he'll finish in the QB 10 slot. Derek Carr is my number 11 quarterback, and he is quarterback 2 on the season right now. His first week total was 21 points. His second week total was 22.8 points. This is a quarterback that does not really run the ball, so he's getting this purely off of just touchdown. He's killing the game right now. Derek Lambo, as Ryan calls him, So, the Saints are looking great. Derek Carr is a must-play as of this moment until he gets fraud checked. So who knows when that'll be, but, I mean, is he a top 3 QB? No. Is he going to finish in the top 3 QBs? No. But with how well he's already done, I can't see him finishing much less than QB 12. So, number 13, we got Geno Smith. Geno Smith is currently the QB 9 on the season with an average of 18.4 points. He's another one that's been consistent. He had 18.8 week 1, 17.9 week 2. Of course, week 1, we know that came mostly off the back of a last-second, 50-yard running touchdown. So, before that, he was going to end as one of the worst QBs that week. Yeah, so, I mean, Geno's good, though. Geno is good, though. He did play a pretty shitty team in the Patriots this week, but he took advantage of it. And a lot of quarterbacks will play those shitty teams and not take advantage of it. So, I'm liking Geno as a QB 2-tier player right now, and I would definitely be playing him. Number 14, I have Kirk Cousins. Now, this is one that can come up from here. He's still, according to himself, not 100%, but he played incredibly this yesterday, or I guess, that Monday night game. Yesterday might be a little bit weird to say, considering you guys have not had a whole day go by like I have. But anyway, he played incredible in the Monday night game against a really good defense in the Eagles. And I'm just going to have to bring up my browser to check what his actual current position is. So it looks like he's actually not doing all that hot. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. He's QB 19 currently, keeping in mind that he had a really bad week 1 that he didn't look back to normal in yet. He's averaging 11.9 points, so he's still in that range of players that are like really just separated by 1 point. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm high on Kirk Cousins rest of season. He's going to make this this Atlanta Falcons team finally look like something, look like a football team maybe. Number 15, I have Patrick Mahomes. He stinks. He's doing worse than he did last year. So Fantasy Pros has him at QB 12 on the season so far. The actual reality of the matter is that he is QB 12 on the season so far. Okay. But I should mention that QB 12 and QB 11, there's a huge 3-point drop-off between them. So CJ Stroud is QB 11 at 16.5 average points, and Patrick Mahomes is QB 12 at 13.1 average points. So that's a huge difference, and that's like, you could basically imagine it as like a five spot difference, really. That's the equivalent of it, at least. There's a whole different tier of quarterback we're talking about, starting with Patrick Mahomes. So, yeah, Patrick Mahomes is currently QB 11. I think, whereas I see a lot of these other guys that are behind him moving up as they kind of like go through this season, Joe Burrow, Kirk Cousins, those guys, I don't see that for Patrick Mahomes, because this is the Patrick Mahomes we saw last year, right? For him, I was supposed to see him be better off the bat. Instead, I'm seeing him be exactly the same as he was last season. So there's no reason for me to think he's going to be better from here on out. He just kind of isn't that good anymore. Or maybe he just doesn't care. That has to be what it really is. He just doesn't care, I think. He just knows he's going to win all these games. He knows he has an elite defense. And he knows the refs are not going to make them lose or let them lose. And then he just turns it on during the playoffs. So he's fine, but he probably isn't going to be super great for you in fantasy. Yeah, so then we have number 16, Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is actually also the QB 16 on the season so far. He has 12.7 points on average. He had a 10-point week and a 15-point week, and that's pretty much what you're going to get with Purdy. He'll be pretty consistent, but like the upside is really low unless he gets like insane amounts of touchdowns. Number 17, I have Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is currently the QB 9 on the season. He had a 15.6 point week and a 20.9 point week for a total of, for an average of 18.3 points per week. So, he's also, there's quite a little bit of a drop off between QB 9 and QB 10 on this list. Realistically, QB 10 and QB 11. A little bit of a drop-off there, too. So Sam Darnold is 1.8 points in front of C.J. Stroud, the next position. And, yeah, Sam Darnold has been really good. I mean, he got the 20 points against the Niners, and he's running as well. So, we already mentioned he had some rush yards, and that's a big positive for Sam Darnold. But, again, it's only week 2. Anyone can have 2 good games in a row, So do I believe in Sam Darnold? No. I don't think he's the caliber of quarterback that he's beating out currently on fantasy, and I think he is due for some regression. I mean, this is the best you could ever imagine Sam Darnold doing for fantasy, so you should be expecting some regression moving forward, especially with Justin Jefferson out. I mean, the Vikings don't really have anyone to pass it to anymore. I would imagine that they're going to be running the ball a lot more now. Yeah. So, number 18, we have Jordan Love. He's just better than everybody else. Almost everybody else I've mentioned already. So, I'm still pretty high on him, despite the fact that I don't think he's playing for another 2 weeks. Yeah, I would love him on my team, even though he's injured, so... Yeah, number 19, we have Jared Goff, currently the QB 23 on the season. No, I expect some positive regression out of Jared Goff. Everybody knows I think Jared Goff's a shit quarterback, but he's still on an incredible team, and he should be getting a lot more touchdowns than he is getting right now. So I'm expecting some positive regression out of Jared Goff. Number 20, I have Bo Nix. I already kind of talked about this. He's averaging 11.7 points each week and is the QB 21 currently. He looks good, and the points that he's gotten up till now look like his kind of floor points. So he's not getting any touchdowns. So once he starts adding touchdowns to that mix, he'll start breaking through that fringe QB2 tier that he's in right now. There are some other honorable mentions I wish I could have talked about. I mean, Trevor Lawrence looks like he's mid enough to break into kind of the end of this list, kind of like Bo Nix. Obviously, Gardner Minshew, Deshaun Watson, Tua Tagovailoa, they're all in the top 15 QBs right now. But, yeah, you're kind of an idiot if you think they're going to stay there. So, all right, moving on to running backs. At number 1, I have Devon Achane, who is just incredibly good and now looks like he might be all that Miami turns to on offense. He is currently the RB2 on the season at 22.8 points on average. Yeah, I don't have too much more to say about that. I've gone over this before about how good I think Devon Achane is, especially for fantasy. Yeah, number 2, I have Alvin Kamara. No one's catching up to his point totals anytime soon, obviously. He's at 31.3 points average per week. No one's catching up to that anytime soon, but I obviously don't think he's going to be able to sustain the level of production he's had so far. Obviously, he's going to take a dip. So that's coming. And I think overall, throughout the course of a season, Devon Achane will probably be outscoring him. And I should mention, again, this has not been updated. So in actuality, Devon Achane is not the QB2 on the season, or the RB2 on the season. It's Saquon Barkley is the RB2 on the season. Yeah. Next up, I have Saquon Barkley. So RB2 on the season right now. I actually think the Eagles might start using him a little bit less. They're using him a lot right now, and I think it bit them in the ass yesterday that Saquon dropped the ball. So I think they might use him a little bit less in the passing game. You can't risk a running back that can't catch the ball and will lose you a whole game because of the lack of that ability. So we'll see what happens there. But as of right now, I mean, he's averaging in the mid-20s. So, pretty high average. Obviously, a big chunk of that is from the incredible performance he had in week 1. But you could say the same thing about Kamara with the incredible performance he had in week 2, right? So, yeah. Number 4, Bijan Robinson. He is just missing the touchdowns right now. He's just missing the touchdowns. His production in-game is unbelievable, but he just hasn't been able to get the touchdowns. The Falcons have have barely ever been in situations where they're like end zone and it makes sense to run, right? So that'll come. He's due for some positive regression. He is currently, unfortunately, again, this is not updated, so I can't tell you from this list, but he is currently, looks like, is that 16? Yeah, RB 16 on the season. Again, I'm expecting some positive regression. He is averaging 13.9 fantasy points. Yeah. So then we have James Cook, number 5. And James Cook is the RB4 on the season right now, averaging 19.9 points. Obviously, a lot of that is coming off of this performance this week, in which he had 3 touchdowns in the first half and 26 points in the first half. And they did not play him again after that. Well, they did very little bit. So he finished with 28. But yeah, so I mean, he is the best player on the Bills. And he should continue to be getting pretty good point totals. He's just a really good running back. Expect him to, kind of stay at this area that he's in right now. He should be able to maintain some of this production. Yeah. Next up, we have Breece Hall at number 6. And on the season, Breece Hall is actually tied for number 6 RB. Well, I guess tied for number 7, considering that Jalen Hurts is God damn it. Saquon Barkley is the actual number 2. So I guess the same thing with James Cook. He's actually the RB5 right now. Yeah, so, Breece Hall, I keep talking shit about him, but he did have a good game this last week. And as much as I talk shit about him, I still love him for fantasy. So, yeah, he's just got a ton of volume. Number 7, I got Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason is currently the RB6 on the season. He's averaging 19.3 fantasy points. I should mention that Breece Hall is averaging 18.4. But yeah, Jordan Mason averaging 19.3 fantasy points. As long as Christian McCaffrey doesn't come back, Jordan Mason is an every week play with RB1 upside. Sorry. Got some fantasy trade stuff going. Anyway. Yeah. RB1 upside. Yeah. Number 8, we got Jahmyr Gibbs. He is performing pretty well already on the season. He is the RB16. And he is averaging 14.8 fantasy points as the RB16. And RB16? No. Sorry. RB15. RB15? Yeah. He's currently the RB15, averaging 14.8 fantasy points, the clear RB1 on the Detroit Lions, and the best player on the Detroit Lions, honestly. He's missing the touchdowns, but once he starts getting those, I mean, his floor points are in the mid-teens, so he's a must-play every week and is probably going to finish RB10 once the touchdowns start bringing up his point totals. Number 9, I have Jonathan Taylor. Obviously, he had a really bad week 1. He had a mid-week 2. But his usage is incredible, and he's also just missing touchdowns. So, I mean, these guys are like a lot of people on this list that you're looking at, on the visual companion list. It's their actual like real life rankings right now. A lot of people that are ahead of these two are people who, like, with touchdowns are getting just over what their floor plays are, right? You can't predict who's going to get a touchdown in any given week, but when your floor plays are guys who are basically, like David Montgomery, for example, is RB11, right? But he's been getting touchdowns, and he's getting 15 points with touchdowns, right? Jahmyr Gibbs is getting 15 points without touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor getting 15 points without touchdowns. So that's who I'm playing, right? I'm going to play the guy who can get me somebody else's touchdown points without any, and then hope that they get a touchdown to bring me into the 20 points. Yeah, so Jonathan Taylor, number 9. Expect some positive regression out of him as well. Number 10, I have J.K. Dobbins, who's been on an absolute tear so far this year. RB4 on the season right now, averaging 20.5 points. Both of his weeks have basically been really high because of one Cookie Monster run. I mean, he's the Breece Hall of this year, where like you give him enough volume, and he's not really getting. I guess maybe he's more of like a Devon Achane of this year, but you give him enough volume, and he's not getting that much. But if you do give him enough volume, he can break away and get you like a 40-yard touchdown. So he has like 2 40-yard touchdowns this season, 1 in each week. So that's 10 points right there, right? So yeah, J.K. Dobbins has been incredible so far this year. So I have him at number 10. At number 11, I have Ramondre Stevenson, who is currently the RB8 on this season. He's averaging 18.1 points. I'm a little concerned about his usage given that Antonio Gibson had such a good game this week. I think it's possible that Ramondre's usage goes down a little bit. His volume goes down a little bit. We'll see. But up until now, he's been excellent. So, yeah, the other people in front of him are just, other than like J.K. Dobbins, the other people in front of him are like so good that it was too hard to put him over them. But he could very well finish in the RB, within the RB10 range.
Yeah, number 12, I have James Conner. James Conner is currently the RB6, I guess RB7 on the season right now. He is averaging 18.4, so he's tied with Breece Hall. He's been awesome. His usage has been awesome. I don't expect it to change. They're going to use James Conner more than anything because Kyler Murray's a bum. And James Conner just seems like the best offensive weapon on that team right now. Well, Marvin Harrison is, but, Marvin Harrison needs another guy to be able to work, and that other guy is a bum. So, yeah, James Conner must play every week. Brian Robinson Jr. is my number 12 gunshot Rob. He is the RB13 on the season, averaging 15.3 fantasy points per week. He is very consistent, and I think he's now rushed for over 100 yards in both games, which would make him out to be one of the best running backs in real life football. Oh, wait, sorry, no. He did not rush for over 100 yards in that first game. Actually, he was pretty bad in that first game. How did he end up with... Oh, he had a touchdown. Okay, so no, he did... Never mind. Just scratch everything I said. That being said, he has really good usage on the Commanders because he's their main running back. And he's the goal line guy. So I really like his trajectory this season. Number 13, I have Josh Jacobs. He is currently the RB23 on the season. He has had an 11.4 point week and a 13.1 point week for an average of 12.3. However, he's playing well. He has 5 yards per carry. And his volume has been unreal. Obviously, that's going to change when Jordan Love comes back and when their backup RBs heal up. All of their other running backs are injured. I'm sure I've mentioned this before. So his volume should take a dip, but he's due for some positive regression because he's also not getting touchdowns. And that'll come. That will definitely come, especially if he's running this well. Like, no one's going to stop him at the 5-yard line, right? At the 4-yard line, at the 3-yard line, yada, yada. Josh Jacobs, number 13. Anyway, number 14, I have Tony Pollard. He is a volume play, like I've mentioned before. He is actually the RB14 on the season right now with 14.8 points on average, tied with Jahmyr Gibbs. And he's been a solid play for fantasy, very solid play for fantasy. So continue to play him. Number 15, I have Kyren Williams. With that Rams O-line, he is not going to be a good player, and he's not going to be very playable. But currently, he is RB20 on the season, with 13.1 points on average. Number 16, I have Travis Etienne. I've mentioned this before as well. The dude was 2 yards away from an 8-point swing in week 1. Nonetheless, he's been a floor play, basically. He's had no upside so far this season. Been completely a floor play. His week 2, 13 points was with a touchdown, so he was horrid this week. Although it was the Cleveland Browns defense. So we'll see. At the end of the day, he's still the number 1 running back on that team. He's being used a lot. So the touchdowns will come, but you're basically chasing touchdowns with ETN at this point. So for me, RB16, he is averaging 12.1 points per game and is the RB24 on the season. Number 17, I have Derrick Henry. Exact same situation as Travis Etienne, the clear RB1 on the team, but you are chasing touchdowns with him. He's not going to produce outside of touchdowns. He had 16 points this week with a touchdown. Who did they play? I forget. Who did the Ravens play? Was it a good defense? It was the Raiders, so they're not really much of a run defense. Very exploitable running defense. So, yeah, I mean, Derrick Henry is a touchdown chase, just like Travis Etienne. He's averaging 13.4 fantasy points. And he's still a play at RB2 every week because he's got enough of a floor that you play him, and the upside is what you're chasing, right? You're chasing that 1 to 2 touchdown game. Even, probably just like ETN, his max upside isn't what you're going to get out of the top 10 guys, but you're chasing that 1 to 2 touchdowns a game from him. And it's very possible because he's the RB1 and he's going to be used at the goal line.
Right. So number 18, we have K-Dub3, who's obviously injured right now. I mean, he is pretty incredible when he's healthy, but he's got to be healthy. The 1 week he played, he scored 17.9. So you play him if he's healthy. Number 19, we have Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones was not good this week. He had 17.9 fantasy points 2 weeks ago, or last week, I should say. And then he had 7 points this week. So, yeah, no. And he's injured. So, Aaron Jones, I'm generous giving him 19. There just isn't that many other running backs left. Number 20, I have Nick Chubb. Everybody knows what I think of Nick Chubb. He's one of the best running backs in the game. I mean, pure running, he might be the best running back in the game. We'll see how he looks after he comes back from injury. But the Browns do love to use their running backs. Next up, we have David Montgomery as the RB. I've been saying these numbers wrong because on my list that I have, I repeated a number once. So Nick Chubb was 21. Number 22, I have David Montgomery. Good old Monty. He is averaging 15.4 fantasy points per week. He is the current RB12. Obviously, pretty much the only reason he is up this high is that overtime against the Rams. You know, he got 10 points in that overtime. He got 10 fantasy points in that overtime. Without that, he wouldn't even be talked about right now. But he did have a good week this week. He is another one that is basically a touchdown chase, but his floor is much lower than Derrick Henry and Travis Etienne. But he's worth flexing. He's still worth flexing for that touchdown chase because you know there's a high chance he can get that touchdown because he's going to be used over Jahmyr Gibbs in goal line situations. Number 23, I have Rachaad White. He's injured right now, so I really hesitated to even put him in this list anymore. Yeah. He's currently the RB 32 on the season. Number 24, I have Devin Singletary. He looked awesome. But he looked awesome against the Commanders' defense, which basically means nothing. 10.6 fantasy points on average. Yeah, he is the RB 26 on the season currently. Number 24, I have Alexander Mattison. He's the only thing that's even remotely working for the Raiders' defense or offense, running on the Raiders. He's the only thing that's remotely working, but he's still not that good either. So he's averaging 10.2 fantasy points. He is the RB 28 currently on the season. I would not play him. I would not flex him. There just isn't that many running backs left. I needed to fill the list to get to 25. Yeah. So Madison will finish off our list at 25. I do have at 26 just in case, or just as a mention, Braylon Allen, the backup running back to Breece Hall. He might be in for a sneaky year. Alrighty, let us move on to the wide receivers. So for my wide receiver one, I have CD Lamb. Yep. He is currently the wide receiver 15 on the season. Actually, he's less because the two teams' wide receivers from last night are not in here. I believe Devonta Smith is actually probably in that top 10, so he might change. Where is Devonta Smith? Let me check. Just give me one momento, por favor. Actually, no, we're fine. Devonta Smith is number 14, so he does not affect this placement. Okay, so CD Lamb. Wait, did I say 14? So he does affect this placement. CD Lamb is the current wide receiver 16 on the season, averaging 14.1 fantasy points. He's due for positive regression. I'm not worried about CD Lamb. Justin Jefferson is the current wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 4 on the season, but he's my number 2. He is averaging 17.6 fantasy points, and I would expect him to kind of stay consistent with that. He did suffer an injury at the end of this week's game, but he says he's going to play next week, so we should be fine there. Number 3, we got Chris Godwin. He is the current wide receiver 1, averaging 19.8 fantasy points. And as long as, Baker Mayfield and him continue to play the way they have been, he should be an easy top wide receiver finish. And I expect them to, because they held it up against really good defense in the Lions. So, number 4, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown. His target share was insane this week. 19 targets, insanity. But that being said, he is currently the wide receiver 30. No, 30 or 29. Probably 29 on this season. He's averaging only 10.1 fantasy points, but we all know that's all just from one fluke week 1. Number 5, I have Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith is the current wide receiver 14, like we mentioned earlier. And the reason I have him this high is because he looked so good in that Eagles-Falcons game. And with A.J. Brown taking extended time off, he's going to be the main beneficiary of that and is going to eat. Next up, at number 6, I have Tyreek Hill. Obviously, I would normally have Tyreek Hill way higher than this, but alas, he does not have a quarterback anymore. Depending on whenever Tua Tagovailoa comes back and depending on who they replace him with. If it's Skylar Thompson, then you should definitely be lower on Tyreek Hill. He had 22.5 fantasy points week 1, but then followed it up with a 5-point performance in week 2. Obviously, the Bills crushed the Dolphins. 13.8 on average. He's the current wide receiver 18. So, yeah, we'll see with Tyreek Hill, but I'm not high on him right now. Number 7, I have Marvin Harrison Jr. That's pretty high for a guy I said to still be cautious of. He is averaging 14 points on average this season, which is basically just half of the points he scored this week. Still be cautious of him. The reason I have him this high is because the wide receivers just suck this year, and so many of them are injured, right? So that's a big thing. Number 8, I have Rashee Rice. Yeah, I need some chicken with that rice because that man is averaging 15 points per week and is the current wide receiver 12. He's crushing the game, and I think it's only going to get worse for his opponents as outshallah actually, but we'll see. As Mahomes kind of regains a little bit of form, he can't possibly be worse than he has been, especially this week. So, yeah. Number 9, I have Jamar Chase. Obviously, Jamar Chase is one of the top 5 wide receivers in football. And with Joe Burrow heating up, he's going to have a great quarterback to pass it to him. He just needs to start warming up because he looks cold as ice right now. Rusty. Current wide receiver 41 with 7.4 points on average. He is tied with Romeo Doubs, but he'll pick it up. Number 10, we got Nico Collins. He's the current wide receiver 2 on this season, averaging 19.1 fantasy points. I can't keep repeating how much I don't believe in Texan players for fantasy, so I'm not. Number 11, Devontae Adams, who is currently the wide receiver 11. 8.4 in week 1, but 21.5 in week 2 against a good defense, against an elite defense. So I'm thinking that maybe they're going to pick it up and that maybe, it's Minshew Mania, So, yeah, Devontae Adams looking good. 15 points on average. He is a top 5 wide receiver in real life, so you should just trust him. Yeah. Whatever. Number 12, I have Marvin Harrison again. What is going on? Why didn't I proofread these lists? Okay. Number 12, I've got Jaden Reed. When Jordan Love comes back, Jaden Reed is going to go back to being one of the absolute best wide receivers in fantasy. He just needs to come back, so we'll see. With him, I still would love him on my team, even though he's injured right now. Him being Jordan Love, I would still love Jaden Reed on my team despite Jordan Love being injured right now because I'm willing to invest in the comeback. Number 13, I have A.J. Brown. He said he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. So at least he's going to be out for one more week. Obviously, that's going to eat into his fantasy production, but I would still want to have him on my team because it's A.J. Brown. I mean, easy, right? Number 14, we got Deebo Samuel Sr. He is going to be out for an extended period of time, which I only found out this morning. I knew he was going to be out for a couple weeks, but extended period of time, not sure how long that means. He's averaging 15.1 points on average this season and is currently the wide receiver 10, so that's a huge hit to whoever owns him. Number 15, I have Brian Thomas Jr., the clear wide receiver 1 on the Jacksonville Jaguars. He is averaging 11.6 fantasy points per week as the wide receiver 24. So, yeah, he needs touchdowns to be really more than a flex play. Yeah. So number 16, I have Zay Flowers. He is the current wide receiver 19, averaging 13.4 fantasy points. Obviously, that first week was not great for him with only 8 points, but the second week, almost 19 points. And as long as Lamar Jackson can just throw the ball in his direction, he is going to make the most of that. Number 17, I have Malik Neighbors, an awesome volume play. Again, he had 18 or 19 targets this game, but he's not going to actually make the most of that every week because he's not going to be playing the Commanders every week. The Commanders absolute garbage. Neighbors is currently the number 8 wide receiver with 16.4 average points, and that's sure to take a dip. Number 18, we have Mike Evans. Mike Evans looks like he's been relegated to the wide receiver 2 spot on his own team, but the Buccaneers currently have so much offense that I would still be pretty high on him. He's the wide receiver 19 currently with 13.2 points on average. Number 19, I have one of Jackson Smith-Njigba or DK Metcalf. It really depends on how the Seahawks continue to shape out. I think, and I'm hopeful, that JSN is going to be the wide receiver 1 on this team. He is the better player, and I don't know why I hope that. I just really hate DK Metcalf. You guys don't understand. Like, when you're a Rams fan or a fan of a team in the NFC West, there are a few players you must hate, right? Depending on what team you're on. Like, if you're a Seahawk fan, you're not going to hate DK Metcalf. If you're a fan of the Arizona Cardinals, the Los Angeles Rams, or the San Francisco 49ers, DK Metcalf is going to be one of your least favorite players in the league. He's dirty. He's a bitch. He's a diva. But mostly he's dirty. He hurts players for no reason. Like, he'll sucker punch them and shit like that. He's a piece of shit. So I don't like the Seahawks, and I don't root for their success, but I root for DK Metcalf's downfall more than I root for the Seahawks' downfall, if that makes sense. So I'm, inshallah, JSN, who is the much better player anyway, shows up and shows out and becomes the wide receiver 1 for this team, clearly. If he does, I could see him going even higher than number 19 because he's not like DK Metcalf. He's not going to stay mid despite being wide receiver 1 volume. Tyler Lockett has pretty much been erased from this offense, which makes sense. The dude's like 80 now. So, at the very least, JSN will be wide receiver 2. I'm a believer in JSN. I think he's really good. So, I'm going to say that number 19, this JSN DK spot, it's probably going to be JSN. And I can see him going even higher up. I'm high on JSN for the rest of the season. Number 20, I have Jameson Williams, who was not a fluke in week 1 and will probably continue to get you flex points. So play him. He is currently the wide receiver 6 on the season with 16.9 average points. Obviously, most of that comes from his week 1 performance, but he still scored 12 points in week 2, which would put him in that flex tier if that was consistently his totals. Number 22, I have Quentin Johnston. Obviously, he kind of showed that he is likely to be the wide receiver 1 for the Los Angeles Chargers. Not sure that means much, but alas, I'm putting him at 22 because the potential is there as a wide receiver 1 for Justin Herbert. Obviously, we've seen how Keenan Allen has done being the wide receiver 1 for Justin Herbert, and he has kind of a Keenan Allen type frame. He's currently the wide receiver 22 on the season with 12.5 average points. Obviously, all of that comes from just 1 week. So it's week 2. Don't make too much of the actual point totals, the actual rankings, because it's just week 2. Do not overreact. Number 23 is Brandon Ayuk, who is the current... Oh, he's low because I don't see him anywhere on the list. Yeah, current wide receiver 56 with only 5 points per week. He's actually 22. Jameson Williams was 20. Quentin Johnston was 21. Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm still high on Ayuk, despite him being in the 50s, is that Deebo Samuel is injured. That's pretty much it, really. He's going to be the wide receiver 1 for this team from now on, so... yeah, he's probably the guy moving forward. Anyway, number 23, I have Chris Olave. Like I said, you should be patient with Chris Olave. The targets are there. The touchdowns will come. This is like the same story every year. Chris Olave will get the tough passes. He will get the wide receiver 1 type targets, but he just never gets the touchdowns. And he's due for some positive regression. So he's the current wide receiver 47 with 6.5 average fantasy points. He is Derek Carr's wide receiver 1. We'll see what happens with that. Obviously, the Saints are not going to be scoring the way they've been scoring all season, but Chris Olave will become a part of that scoring, even though it's lower. So I still think he's flexible. He's just got too much upside not to flex. Wide receiver 24, I have Calvin Ridley. He is the current wide receiver 13 with 14.6 points on average. That's all pretty much from this week. He had an insane game. He's definitely Will Levis's number 1 wide receiver, and he's going to get a good amount of targets. It just comes down to, can Will Levis support a number 1 wide receiver? Which, I mean, this week he could, so let's see. Number 25, I have Stephon Diggs. He was not as good this week as he was last week, and last week he was only good because of 2 touchdowns, so I don't know why I have him here, honestly. But anyway, 22, wide receiver 22 on the season so far. Oh, wide receiver 23 on the season so far, averaging 12.3 fantasy points. I guess the only reason I do have him up here is because he's going to be a touchdown threat every game, so you're chasing touchdowns with Stephon Diggs, but I don't know if I'd have the confidence to play him week in, week out, unless the matchup was right. Number 26, I have Xavier Worthy, same as Stephon Diggs, same exact thing as Stephon Diggs. He's got explosive play potential. He just won't get the ball that much, so you want to play him on the right matchups, on exploitable defenses, because you know if the defense is exploitable, then Xavier Worthy's explosion, like explosive ability, is likely going to end in a touchdown that week. And then number 27, I have the second guy between JSN and DK Metcalf, who I'm going to assume is going to be DK Metcalf. He's going to have some big weeks. He's going to have mostly dud weeks, but altogether it should average out to become a flexible player. Yeah. And then finally, we're going to move on to the tight ends. And in my flex scoring tier, so I've changed the names of my tiers. It used to be the wide receiver 1 to wide receiver 2 scoring tier. It's looking like no tight end is going to be doing that this year. So I've changed it to flex scoring tier. And then the second tier, which was flex scoring tier, has changed into rostered tier, which just means that there are people that you don't stream, you just roster and play them and don't think about it week in, week out.
So in the flex scoring tier at number 1, I have Brock Bowers. He is the number 1 target for the Las Vegas Raiders and has looked incredible up till now. He is every bit the generational tight end that he was hyped to be. He is the current tight end 2, tied with George Kittle at 11.6 fantasy points per week. Number 2, I have Trey McBride. He is the current tight end 6 with 7.6 fantasy points per week. Obviously, we know what Trey McBride can do. He was drafted to be the tight end 2 this year. Number 3, I have George Kittle. Just talked about him, tight end 2 for the week or for the season so far, averaging 11.6 fantasy points. And to me, tight end 2 is basically tight end 1 because tight end 1 is Isaiah Likely, all from 1 week, and really you're not going to play Isaiah Likely. Number 4, I have Hunter Henry. He is the Patriots tight end, and based on how they played this week, I think they're going to continue to use him in the passing game because they're only going to do small, short routes. They're going to mostly rely on the running game, but if they do play action, it's going to be probably to Hunter Henry. So, he's the current tight end 4, averaging 8.9 fantasy points. In my roster tier at number 5, I have Mark Andrews. Yes. I do not have Isaiah Likely, but I do have Mark Andrews. I think that Lamar still sees him as his favorite tight end. He's averaging 4.8 fantasy points at tight end 14, keeping in mind that week 1 he was barely seen. Number 6, I have Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce doesn't have any excuses to be as bad as he's been so far. He did not even make it into this. I cut it off at 25. He did not make it into the top 25 to be on this list right now. So I don't know where he is. Yeah, honestly, 6. It's Travis Kelce. So I'm going to believe that, he's going to have some positive regression. Number 7, TJ Hawkinson. He's pretty much stayed at this spot from the beginning of the season. Once he comes back, he will be one of the best tight ends in the league. Number 8, I have Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta is the current tight end 16, averaging 4.4 fantasy points. He has pretty much been erased from the Detroit Lions offense, and I'm not sure why. It might be because of the emergence of Jameson Williams. So Jared Goff looks like he's only looking at Jameson Williams because he wants that explosive play. And if it's not Jameson Williams, it's going straight to Sun God, who he knows is going to make the catch and get him the yards. So, yeah. Looks like Sam Laporta has been eliminated from that offense, but we'll see. I mean, he's too good for me to say that, he's not playable. So we'll see. And that pretty much does all the rankings. As for waiver wire pickups, I talked about some of them in the recaps, and I said I was going to do a summary at the very end of it, but I don't remember who I said. So go back and watch the recap portion of today's episode, or go back and listen to the recap portion of today's episode to get an idea of who is worth picking up on waivers. I will say right off the top of my head, the guy that I would be gunning for if I were any of you out there, the number 1 guy I would be gunning for is Quentin Johnston. Braylon Allen is a handcuff pickup for those of you who don't have a lot of depth at running back and really want a running back. The Broncos wide receivers, I forget who they were. Josh Reynolds, I think, is one. I would look at them. The Eagles, what was his name? Something Colby? Something like that. Britton Colby or something like that. He's worth a look at. Like, I wouldn't play him even if I pick him up, but he's worth a look at because, he might have a really good week next week as the wide receiver too, and then you want to play him after that, right? As long as A.J. Brown is still out. So those are off the top of my head the ones I can think of. They deserve a look at the waiver. There's no tight end that I'm trying to pick up off the waiver. There's no quarterback that I'm trying to pick up off the waiver. Another good handcuff that you might look at off the waiver if you are missing running back depth is Antonio Gibson off the Patriots. That's another really good one to really consider. Yeah, that might be it.
Andre Ioshivash. I don't know if anyone has him. Yoshivash. Jalen Naylor on the Vikings, especially with Justin Jefferson having questionable health. Who was that other guy I mentioned that was awesome and was really targeted? There was another guy. Oh, I forgot who it was. But yeah, Jalen Naylor, Andre Ioshivash off the Cincinnati Bengals. As long as Jamar Chase is not going to perform, Ioshivash is going to be the main beneficiary of that. What's his name? The Rams guy. Jordan Whittington is another one I would consider. I wouldn't play him, but I would pick him up as long as Kupp and Puka Nacua are out. He has, like I said before in my recap portion, he's one of the guys that can break through for the Rams. He's a rookie and a really solid rookie at that. And then the final guy I would mention, I found him, is Jalen Tolbert on the Dallas Cowboys. He was targeted a lot by Dak Prescott. He may emerge as their wide receiver too. And that's a big thing for the Cowboys because the Cowboys are all offense. At least they were last year. They haven't started the year that way. They will get there. Believe me, the Cowboys will get there. And if they get there and Jalen Tolbert does emerge as a wide receiver 2 option on this team, then 1, CeeDee Lamb is probably not going to finish as high as I said. And 2, Jalen Tolbert is going to be a sneaky, huge pickup. He might be the huge pickup of the fucking waiver wire this week. So Quentin Johnson and Jalen Tolbert are the 2 that I would put high on your lists. And I would not play Jalen Tolbert this week, but I would keep him just to see what can happen with him. And then the rest of them I would also consider picking up. And that is all I've got for you guys today. So we will see you again. This will be my only episode for the week because I don't really have much else to talk about. I guess there are previews. Yeah, I can talk about previews on Thursday. But otherwise, that will do it for today's episode, and we will see you guys again shortly.